The prepaid phone sat hidden beneath a pile of old lipsticks at the bottom of Elder's makeup drawer. Most of the lipsticks had dried years ago. Their colors faded into dull reminders of a woman she barely remembered being. Once, she had loved the soft coral shade she used to wear to church on Sundays. Charles had told her it looked silly on a woman her age, so she stopped wearing it. Now the tube rested there like a quiet protest. The phone was cheap. A small plastic flip phone she had bought with coins from the laundry machine downstairs. It wasn't smart, it wasn't elegant. But it held something more valuable than any device she had ever owned. It held possibility. Eleanor closed the drawer carefully when she heard Charles moving in the living room. "Eleanor," his voice called. "Yes," she answered, stepping out of the bedroom. He stood by the window, looking down at the parking lot, with the same critical expression he used for everything lately. "Where were you yesterday afternoon?" "I told you," she said calmly. "I went to the library." "The library," he repeated slowly, as if testing the word for lies. "You already have plenty of books here." "I wanted something different." Charles turned toward her, his eyes narrowing just slightly. After 42 years of marriage, Eleanor knew every expression he had. This one meant suspicion. "You were gone an hour and 20 minutes. I didn't realize you were timing me." "I wasn't timing you," he said sharply. "I just noticed." He always noticed. He noticed when she used an extra tablespoon of sugar in the coffee. He noticed when she left the apartment 15 minutes earlier than usual. He noticed when she bought shampoo that wasn't on sale. Retirement had turned his attention into a spotlight that followed her everywhere. "I'm just tired today," Eleanor said gently. "The heat makes me slow." Charles studied her a moment longer before nodding. "Well, dinner should be something light tonight. My stomach feels off." "Of course." She moved into the kitchen automatically, her body following habits built over decades. The refrigerator hummed softly while she took out vegetables. Chop, wash, slice, stir. Every motion felt familiar, every motion felt like a cage. She had once believed retirement would be freedom for both of them. Travel, quiet mornings with coffee, maybe visits to their daughter Jennifer in Seattle. Instead, retirement had given Charles time. Too much time. At first he had only asked questions. "Where are you going today? What did you buy? Who called earlier?" Soon the questions became instructions. "Don't drive so much. Gas is expensive. You don't need that brand. Why are you talking to Susan again? She fills your head with nonsense." Then came the money. Charles had always handled the bills, but Eleanor kept her own checking account. Her father helped her open it when she was 19, long before she met Charles. She had kept it through marriage, through raising Jennifer, through decades of quiet routines. One afternoon Charles sat her down at the kitchen table. "It's inefficient," he said. "2 accounts for a married couple." "It's just for small things," she replied. "Lunch with friends, gifts. No reason for it." "We'll consolidate." The account was closed the next week. Everything went into Charles's account. Her pension from 30 years as a school secretary, her social security check, even the small savings she had carefully built over time. He gave her $75 every 2 weeks. For groceries and whatever you need. At first she thought it was temporary. But the questions followed every purchase. "Why is this receipt $32? Do you really need vitamins? You're wasting money sitting in cafes with those book club women." Eventually Eleanor stopped going to book club. She stopped meeting Susan for lunch. She stopped volunteering at the school library where children once hugged her in the hallways and called her Mrs. Thompson with bright smiles. Life became smaller. The apartment became everything. And Charles became the center of it. One August morning, Eleanor stood in the pharmacy counting the money in her wallet. $20, $40, $60. Her blood pressure medication cost $47. That left $13 for food for 2 weeks. Her hands trembled as she counted again. The pharmacist, a young woman named Amy, watched her quietly. "Mrs. Thompson?" she asked gently. Eleanor looked up quickly, embarrassed by the tears in her eyes. I'm fine, she said. Amy stepped closer. Are you sure? Eleanor nodded, though the motion felt weak. She paid for the medication. Amy slipped the receipt into the bag, then hesitated before pressing a small business card into Eleanor's hand. Just keep this, she said softly. Eleanor glanced down. Helen Kowalski, Elder Services Advocate, Oak Street. My grandmother went through something similar. Amy whispered. This woman helped her. Eleanor didn't reply. She folded the card carefully and placed it in her purse. That night she couldn't sleep. Charles snored beside her while the ceiling fan spun slow circles above them. At 4 a.m. she walked into the kitchen and opened her recipe box. The card rested between index cards filled with her mother's handwriting. Oak Street. 6 blocks away. For a week she ignored it. For another week she pretended it didn't exist. But on a Friday morning, when Charles left for breakfast with his old postal service friends, Eleanor slipped the card into her pocket and walked to Oak Street. The office was small, tucked between a dental clinic and a tax service. She walked past it once, twice, 3 times. Finally she stepped inside. The reception area smelled faintly of tea and lemon cleaner. A woman about her age sat behind a desk and smiled kindly. Can I help you? I'm looking for Helen. Eleanor said quietly. Your name? Eleanor Thompson. A few minutes later Helen appeared. She was younger than Eleanor expected, maybe 50, with streaks of gray in her hair and eyes that seemed to understand things before they were spoken. I'm glad you came, Helen said gently. They sat in a small office overlooking a courtyard. Helen poured tea and waited. At first Eleanor struggled to find words. But sorely, the story began spilling out. 15 years of control. Of $75 every 2 weeks. Of mail screened and phone calls monitored. Of friendships disappearing. I know it sounds ridiculous. Eleanor whispered. He's never hit me. Helen leaned forward. It's not ridiculous, she said firmly. Financial abuse is real. Isolation is real. Eleanor felt tears slide down her cheeks. I can't leave, she said automatically. I have nothing. Helen shook her head. You have more than you think. Over the next 2 months Eleanor visited every Friday. Together they made a plan, a real plan. First, documents. Birth certificate. Social security card. Marriage license. Bank statements. Charles kept everything in a locked metal box in the closet. Finding the key took weeks. It was taped inside an old shoebox on the top shelf. Her hands shook as she opened the box for the first time. So many papers, so many secrets. On the 5th Friday she took them to a copy store 3 blocks away. Every time the door opened she thought it might be Charles walking in. But she finished. The copies went into Helen's safe file. The originals returned to the box. Second, money. A lawyer named Patricia explained Eleanor's legal rights. You're entitled to half, Patricia said plainly. But you need to leave first. Leave, the word felt enormous. Where would I go? Helen smiled slightly. I know someone. Dorothy ran a small residence for women over 60 starting over. The building was simple, a converted duplex with 4 small apartments. Not fancy, but safe. Dorothy handed Eleanor a small black suitcase from storage. Left behind by someone who moved on to better things, she said. You will too. Eleanor hid the suitcase in her closet. Over 4 weeks she filled it slowly. 2 pairs of pants, 3 blouses, underwear, her mother's wedding ring, a photo album from before she married Charles. Everything important fit in one small bag. 42 years of marriage, 67 years of life, reduced to a suitcase she could carry with one hand. The night before leaving she lay Charles listening to his breathing. She felt nothing. No anger. No love. Just quiet relief. Morning came. She made scrambled eggs, wheat toast, black coffee. Charles read the news on his tablet and complained about gas prices. She washed the dishes. Handed him his keys. He didn't kiss her goodbye. He hadn't in years. 10 minutes after he left, Eleanor pulled the suitcase from the closet. Her hands were steady. She walked through the apartment one last time. The kitchen, the living room. The bedroom where she had forgotten what it felt like to be wanted. Then she stepped outside. Margaret, a retired librarian, waited in a car downstairs ready. Margaret asked. Eleanor placed the suitcase in the trunk. Yes, she said softly. Ready. And for the first time in 15 years, Eleanor Thompson felt the air fill her lungs like freedom. Margaret's car pulled away from the curb slowly, the tires making a soft rolling sound against the pavement. Eleanor sat quietly in the passenger seat, her hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead as the apartment building disappeared behind them. She had lived there for 18 years. 18 years of cooking meals in the same kitchen, folding laundry in the same cramped hallway, standing at the same living room window watching seasons change. Now it was gone in the rearview mirror. Margaret didn't say anything for the first few minutes. She seemed to understand that silence was kinder than questions. Eleanor watched familiar streets pass by. The grocery store where she once carefully counted coupons. The pharmacy where Amy had handed her the small card that started everything. The bus stop where she used to meet Susan years ago, before lunches became impossible to explain. Each place held a memory of a life that had slowly shrunk until there was barely room for her inside it. "You're doing something brave," Margaret said finally. Eleanor gave a small nod. "I don't feel brave. Most brave people don't," Margaret replied gently. They drove through a neighborhood Eleanor had never visited before, even though it was only a few miles from her apartment. The streets were lined with small trees, their branches forming a quiet canopy above the road. Children's bicycles leaned against fences. A dog barked somewhere behind a yard gate. It looked peaceful, normal. Margaret turned onto Maple Avenue and slowed beside a modest two-story house with pale yellow siding. "This is it," she said. Dorothy was waiting on the front porch. She looked exactly the way Eleanor remembered from their brief meeting a few weeks earlier. Sturdy posture, silver hair pulled into a bun, and the calm expression of someone who had seen many hard beginnings. "You made it," Dorothy said warmly. Eleanor stepped out of the car, suddenly aware of how light her suitcase felt compared to the weight of the moment. Margaret lifted the bag from the trunk and handed it to her. "You'll be all right here," Margaret said. "Thank you," Eleanor whispered. Margaret squeezed her shoulder once before getting back into the car. The engine started, and then Eleanor was standing there alone with Dorothy on the quiet street. "Come inside," Dorothy said. The front door opened into a small hallway that smelled faintly of soup and fresh bread. The house felt lived in but peaceful, the kind of place where voices stayed soft and footsteps didn't echo. Dorothy led her upstairs. "This one's yours." The apartment was simple. A single bed, a dresser, a small kitchenette with a microwave and two-burner stove, a narrow bookshelf filled with worn paperbacks. A window overlooked a small courtyard with a bench beneath a maple tree. Eleanor stepped inside slowly. "It's perfect," she said quietly. Dorothy nodded. "Dinner's at 6 in the common room downstairs. 3 other women live here right now. No pressure if you're not ready," Eleanor thanked her. After Dorothy left, the room became very still. Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed and placed the suitcase beside her. For a moment she simply breathed. Then the tears came. Not the frightened kind she had cried in the pharmacy. Not the silent ones she wiped away in the kitchen while Charles complained about grocery receipts. These tears came from somewhere deeper. Relief. It poured through her chest like fresh air after years underground. She was safe. The thought felt unfamiliar. She unpacked slowly. 2 pairs of pants folded into the dresser. Blouses placed carefully on hangers. The photo album rested on the bedside table. When she opened it, a younger version of herself smiled from the pages. There she was at 25 in a white dress beside Charles on their wedding day. They both looked hopeful. Another photo showed Jennifer as a toddler sitting on Eleanor's lap with a messy chocolate-covered smile. Eleanor touched the photograph gently. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Downstairs voices drifted faintly through the floor. Other women. Other lives starting over. By the time 6 o'clock arrived, Eleanor felt steady enough to go down. The common room was cozy with a long wooden table and mismatched chairs. Three women sat there talking quietly. Dorothy stood at the stove stirring a large pot. Everyone, Dorothy said, this is Eleanor. The women looked up and smiled warmly. This is Ruth. Dorothy continued, pointing to a petite woman with short white curls. Carol. A tall woman with glasses who raised her hand in greeting. And Linda. Linda looked around Eleanor's age, with soft brown eyes and a kind smile. Nice to meet you, Linda said. Eleanor felt shy but relieved. Nice to meet you too. Dinner was simple vegetable soup and bread. But Eleanor couldn't remember the last time food tasted this comforting. The women talked about ordinary things, grocery sales, a television show someone liked, the best place to buy comfortable shoes. No one asked Eleanor why she was there. That kindness felt enormous. Later that night Eleanor returned to her room. The quiet was different from the silence of her old apartment. There was no tension in the air. No footsteps she had to anticipate. No voice ready to question every small decision. She slept deeply. The next morning she woke to sunlight streaming through the window. For a moment she didn't recognize where she was. Then memory returned. She sat up slowly. Freedom felt strange. Her first instinct was to check the time, and wonder whether Charles expected something from her. But there was no schedule now. No interrogation waiting in the kitchen. Just morning light. Eleanor made tea and sat by the window. Outside, a squirrel darted across the courtyard and climbed the maple tree. She smiled faintly. At 10 o'clock her borrowed flip phone rang. Her heart jumped. The screen displayed a number she didn't recognize. Hello, she said cautiously. Mrs. Thompson. It was Patricia, the lawyer. The papers were served this morning. Patricia said. Eleanor felt her stomach tighten. How did he react? Well, Patricia said carefully. Wasn't pleased. Eleanor almost laughed. I imagine not. He tried to refuse them at first, Patricia continued. But the deputy explained that wasn't an option. What did he say? He insisted you'd been manipulated. That you'd never leave on your own. Eleanor looked out the window at the quiet courtyard. I suppose that's easier for him to believe. Patricia's voice softened. You did something very difficult, Eleanor. Remember that? After the call ended, Eleanor sat quietly for a long time. Across the city Charles was likely pacing the apartment, furious and confused. He would check the closet. See the empty space where the suitcase had been. Realize the truth. For years she had imagined leaving a note explaining everything. But Patricia advised against it. No explanations, no arguments, just distance. Later that afternoon another call came, this time from Patricia again. There's someone who wants to speak with you, she said. Ooh. Your Eleanor's breath caught. Jennifer. Yes. Her hands trembled as she lifted the phone. Mom. The voice sounded older than Eleanor remembered. But it was unmistakable. Jennifer, Eleanor whispered. A soft sob came through the phone. I've been trying to reach you for years. Eleanor closed her eyes. I know, she said. And for the first time in a very long time, Eleanor Thompson began telling the truth. Mom. Jennifer's voice trembled through the small phone speaker, thin but unmistakably familiar. It had been 5 years since Eleanor last heard it. Yet the sound instantly filled the quiet room with memories. Eleanor held the phone with both hands. Jennifer, she whispered again. On the other end, her daughter was crying openly now. I wrote you so many letters, Jennifer said. Birthdays, Christmas, Mother's Day. I thought maybe you were angry with me or maybe you just didn't care anymore. Eleanor closed her eyes as the words pierced something deep inside her. I cared, she said softly. Every day. Then why didn't you answer? Eleanor sat slowly in the chair by the window. For years she had rehearsed explanations in her mind. But now that the moment had arrived, the truth felt difficult to shape into words. Your father handled the mail, she said quietly. And the phone calls. There was a long silence. You mean he didn't give them to you? I don't think he ever intended to. Jennifer's breathing grew uneven. Oh my God, she murmured. I thought you the one who didn't want contact. I'm so sorry, Eleanor said, tears slipping down her cheeks. I should have found a way sooner. Jennifer sniffed. I'm just glad you're okay. The lawyer told me you left. Les. Are you safe? Eleanor looked around the small room, the simple bed, the bookshelf, the window overlooking the maple tree. Yes, she said. I am. Another pause followed. Then Jennifer spoke again, her voice stronger this time. Mom, you could have called me. I would have helped you. I know. Eleanor replied. But after a while, you start believing you don't deserve hell. That's not true. I know that now. They talked for nearly an hour. Jennifer told her about life in Seattle, about the hospital where she worked as a nurse practitioner, about the teenagers Eleanor had never met, her grandchildren. Daniel just turned 16, Jennifer said. He's obsessed with computers, and Sophie is 14. She paints constantly. Eleanor listened with a mixture of joy and regret. I wish I had been there, she said quietly. You're here now, Jennifer replied. When the call finally ended, Eleanor sat silently for a long time. The afternoon sunlight moved slowly across the floor. She had expected leaving Charles to feel terrifying. Instead, it felt like doors opening in every direction. That evening at dinner, the other women noticed the brightness in her face. Good news? Ruth asked with a gentle smile. I spoke with my daughter, Eleanor said. Carol clapped her hands softly. Well, that's wonderful. She's coming to visit, Eleanor added. Linda asked. Soon. As soon as she can arrange time off. The table filled with warm excitement. It felt strange and comforting to share good news with people who were practically strangers only days earlier. Later that night, Eleanor washed dishes beside Linda. Linda spoke quietly while they worked. My husband left me when I was 62, she said. Walked out for a woman half his age. Eleanor glanced at her with surprise. You seem very calm about it. Linda shrugged. It took years. At first I thought my life was over. But eventually I realized something important. What's that? I was finally free to decide who I wanted to be. Eleanor considered those words. Free to decide. For decades she had shaped herself around Charles's expectations. Now there was empty space where those expectations used to be. It felt unfamiliar. But also exciting. The next morning Patricia called again. Charles has hired a lawyer, she said. Eleanor wasn't surprised. He claims you're confused and that someone manipulated you. Manipulated me into leaving, Eleanor asked. Yes. He's also arguing that you abandoned the marriage. Eleanor almost laughed. For 15 years he controlled every dollar I had. I know. Patricia said. And we have documentation. Patricia explained that the case might take months. Charles would likely fight every part of the settlement. But Eleanor felt strangely calm. She had already taken the hardest step. Everything else was simply time. Over the next few weeks Eleanor settled into a gentle routine. In the morning she walked around the neighborhood. Maple Avenue was quiet, lined with gardens and old houses. Sometimes she stopped at a small bakery on the corner and bought a single cinnamon roll. The first time she did it, she felt guilty spending money on something unnecessary. Then she reminded herself that she was allowed. In the afternoons she visited the public library. The smell of books felt like returning home. One day she asked the librarian if they needed volunteers. We always do, the woman replied. Soon Eleanor was helping shelve books and reading stories to children during the Saturday program. Their bright faces reminded her of the school library where she once worked. One afternoon while she was placing novels back on the shelf, someone spoke behind her. Mrs. Thompson, she turned. Amy, the pharmacist who gave her Helen's card, stood there holding a stack of books. Eleanor smiled in surprise. Amy. I wasn't sure it was you. Amy said. How so? Lighter, Amy replied. Eleanor felt warmth spread through her chest. I suppose I am, Amy's eyes softened. I'm really glad you called Helen. So am I. The two women talked briefly before Amy left. As Eleanor watched her go, she realized something important. One small act of kindness had changed everything. A simple business card. A quiet suggestion. Sometimes rescue didn't arrive dramatically. Sometimes it arrived as a whisper. That evening Eleanor returned to Dorothy's house feeling grateful in a way she hadn't felt in years. Dinner was spaghetti and salad. The women laughed over stories about grocery stores and strange neighbors. For the first time in decades, Eleanor felt something she had nearly forgotten. Belonging. After dinner she went upstairs and opened the photo album again. She studied the picture of herself and Charles on their wedding day. They looked so young, so certain of the future. "I wonder where we lost each other," she murmured. But the question no longer carried pain. Some things didn't need answers. Outside the window the maple tree swayed gently in the evening breeze. Eleanor closed the album and placed it back on the bedside table. Tomorrow would bring another step forward. And for the first time in 15 years, she was looking forward to tomorrow. Morning sunlight slipped through the thin curtains and spread slowly across the floor of Eleanor's small room. The light woke her before the alarm on the borrowed phone could buzz. For a moment she stayed still listening. In her old apartment, mornings had always begun with tension. Charles clearing his throat in the hallway, cabinet doors opening sharply, the low hum of the television news already filling the living room. Here, the house was quiet. Peaceful. Somewhere downstairs Dorothy was moving around the kitchen, the soft clink of dishes drifting upward. The smell of coffee followed soon after. Eleanor sat up slowly and smiled to herself. Freedom still felt unfamiliar. Like wearing a new pair of shoes that hadn't quite molded to her feet yet. But every day it felt a little more natural. She dressed and went downstairs. Dorothy stood at the stove flipping pancakes. "Good morning," Dorothy said. "Morning," Eleanor replied. "You look rested." "I slept like a child." Dorothy chuckled and placed a plate in front of her. "Eat." "Starting over requires energy." Eleanor laughed softly and sat at the small kitchen table. Ruth and Carol joined them a few minutes later, both still in slippers. Linda whined in last, tying her hair into a loose ponytail. Breakfast turned into an easy conversation about the weather, the price of milk, and a stray cat that had been visiting the courtyard at night. The ordinary rhythm of it filled Eleanor with quiet comfort. After breakfast she walked to the library. The sky was bright blue, and the air carried the soft warmth of early autumn. She passed small houses with tidy gardens and children's chalk drawings on sidewalks. Every step felt like a reminder that she belonged in the world again. At the library the head librarian, a cheerful woman named Denise, waved her over. "Mrs. Thompson. The kids' reading program starts in 10 minutes. Eleanor smiled. "I'll be ready." The children arrived in a noisy cluster, backpacks bouncing and voices full of energy. Eleanor sat on the carpet with a picture book in her hands. As she read, their faces turned serious and focused, hanging on every word. When the story ended, a little boy with freckles raised his hand. "Are you coming back next week?" Eleanor felt a small warmth in her chest. "Yes," she said. "I think I will." After the program ended, Denise walked her toward the front desk. "You're wonderful with them," Denise said. "I used to work in a school library." "Well, we're lucky to have you." Eleanor returned to Dorothy's house that afternoon feeling content. But the peace didn't last long. Her phone rang just as she stepped inside. The number was unfamiliar. "Hello. Mrs. Thompson, this is Patricia." Eleanor immediately recognized the lawyer's voice. "Is everything all right?" Patricia hesitated. "Charles has filed a formal response to the separation." Eleanor sat down slowly. "He's claiming you're mentally unstable." The words landed heavily. "He says you're suffering from confusion and that certain individuals influenced you." Eleanor felt a flash of anger, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. "I knew he'd say something like that." "Yes," Patricia replied calmly. "Unfortunately, it's a common tactic." "What happens now?" "We present the evidence," Patricia said. "The financial records, the bank statements, the documentation of restricted access to your funds." Eleanor took a steady breath. "I'm not afraid." "Good," Patricia said. "Because the truth is very clear." After the call ended, Eleanor sat quietly for a while. Dorothy noticed her expression when she came into the kitchen. "Bad news?" Charles is trying to claim I'm mentally unstable. Dorothy snorted. That's a classic. You've seen it before. Many times, Dorothy said. Control doesn't disappear just because someone walks away. Eleanor nodded slowly. I'm ready to fight. Dorothy placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. And you won't be fighting alone. That evening the women gathered for dinner. Carol had cooked chicken and roasted vegetables. During the meal Eleanor told them about the lawyer's call. Ruth shook her head. My ex-husband tried the same thing. Claimed I was forgetful. What happened? Eleanor asked. The judge asked him 3 questions about our finances. Ruth said. Couldn't answer any of them. The table burst into laughter. The tension dissolved instantly. Later that night Eleanor sat by her window watching the courtyard. The maple tree leaves were beginning to turn shades of red and gold. She thought about the years she spent believing she had no power. How easily control had slipped into her life one small decision at a time. But now the pattern was broken. The next morning brought unexpected news. Her phone rang again. Mom. Jennifer's voice said. Jennifer, I've booked a flight, her daughter said excitedly. I'll be there next week. Eleanor's heart skipped. Next week. I took a few days off work, I want to see you. Tears filled Eleanor's eyes again. I can't wait. Me either. After the call ended Eleanor felt a surge of nervous energy. 5 years was a long time. Would Jennifer feel distant? Would they struggle to reconnect? Linda noticed her pacing in the hallway later. Everything okay? My daughter is coming to visit, Eleanor said. That's wonderful. I'm just nervous. Linda smiled knowingly. Families have a way of finding each other again. Eleanor hoped she was right. The week passed quickly. Each day brought small moments of anticipation. She cleaned her room twice even though it was already tidy. She bought fresh flowers for the windowsill. She even tried on several blouses before deciding which one to wear. Finally the day arrived. Margaret offered to drive her to the airport. As they waited near the arrivals gate, Eleanor's hands trembled slightly. You'll do great, Margaret assured her. Passengers began streaming through the doors. Business travelers. Families with children, couples pulling suitcases. Then Eleanor saw her. Jennifer walked through the crowd scanning the room. Her hair was shorter than Eleanor remembered, and faint lines marked the corners of her eyes. But the smile was the same. Mom. Jennifer rushed forward. They wrapped their arms around each other tightly. For a long moment neither of them spoke, they simply held on. I missed you so much. Jennifer whispered. Eleanor closed her eyes. I missed you too. When they finally pulled apart, Jennifer studied her mother's face. You look happier. Eleanor smiled. I am. Margaret approached with Eleanor's coat. This must be Jennifer. Jennifer nodded warmly. Thank you for helping my mom. Margaret waved the gratitude away. She helped herself. The drive back to Maple Avenue felt like the beginning of something new. Jennifer asked questions about everything. Dorothy's house. The other women. The library. Eleanor answered them all with quiet pride. When they arrived, Dorothy greeted Jennifer with a hug. Welcome, she said. Jennifer looked around the cozy house. This place is amazing. It's a beginning, Dorothy replied. That night Jennifer joined them for dinner. Stories flowed easily round the table. Laughter echoed through the dining room. Later Jennifer followed Eleanor upstairs. She stood in the doorway of the small apartment and looked around. You live here? For now, Eleanor said. Jennifer turned to her mother with shining eyes. You saved your son. Eleanor smiled softly. Yes, she said. I finally did. Jennifer stood by the window of Eleanor's small apartment, looking out at the courtyard where the maple tree swayed gently in the evening breeze. The soft yellow light from the room behind them spilled across the floor, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Eleanor watched her daughter carefully. 5 years had changed Jennifer in ways both small and obvious. There were faint lines around her eyes now, and a quiet confidence in the way she stood. But the warmth in her expression was the same as when she had been a little girl running through the house. With scraped knees and tangled hair. I wish I had known, Jennifer said quietly. Eleanor moved closer and placed a hand on her arm. I didn't know how to tell you. You could have called. Eleanor admitted. Jennifer turned quickly. When? About 4 years ago, Charles was out playing poker. I found your number in an old address book and dialed it. But I hung up before it connected. Why? Eleanor looked down at her hands. I was afraid he'd find out. Jennifer's face tightened with anger. He had no right to control you like that. I know, Eleanor said gently. But it didn't happen all at once. She sat down in the reading chair and Jennifer took the bed across from her. It started with small things. Eleanor continued. He'd say he was protecting us financially. Or that he didn't trust certain people. Over time those small decisions became rules. Jennifer listened silently. And eventually, Eleanor said, I forgot what it felt like to make my own choices. Jennifer reached forward and took her mother's hands. Well, that's over now. Eleanor smiled softly. Yes, it is. They talked late into the night. Jennifer told her about the hospital, where she worked and the constant rush of patients. About Daniel's fascination with computers and Sophie's love for painting. She'd just finished a mural in her school hallway. Jennifer said proudly. I'd love to see pictures. Jennifer pulled out her phone and showed Eleanor dozens of photos. Eleanor leaned closer, studying each one carefully. Her grandchildren. Children she had only known through imagination for years. They're beautiful, she said quietly. They want to meet you, Jennifer replied. I'd like that very much. The next morning Jennifer joined the other women for breakfast. Dorothy poured coffee while Ruth passed around a basket of toast. So you're the famous daughter we've heard about, Ruth said with a smile. Jennifer laughed. I hope the stories were good ones. Only the best, Linda replied. The room filled with easy conversation. Jennifer watched the women carefully, noticing how relaxed her mother seemed among them. Later, when they stepped outside for a walk around the neighborhood, Jennifer spoke quietly. I'm glad you have this. So am I. You seem different. Eleanor looked thoughtful. For a long time I felt like I was shrinking. Like pieces of me were disappearing every year. And now I feel like I'm growing again. Jennifer smiled. That's exactly what I hoped to hear. They walked past the bakery on the corner. The smell of fresh cinnamon drifted through the open door. Let's go in, Jennifer said. Eleanor hesitated for a moment out of old habit. But then she nodded. Inside they ordered 2 cinnamon rolls and coffee. They sat by the window watching people pass by on the sidewalk. This feel normal, Jennifer said. Eleanor laughed softly. It does. The conversation shifted to the future. Mom, Jennifer said carefully, you could come live with us in Seattle. Eleanor looked at her with affection. That's very kind. I'm serious. We have a guest room. The kids would love having you there. Eleanor considered the offer. It was tempting. But something inside her resisted leaving just yet. I think I need to stay here for a while, she said gently. Jennifer nodded. To rebuild. Yes. They finished their coffee and walked back to Maple Avenue. That afternoon Patricia called. Good news. The lawyer said. What kind of good news? Eleanor asked. The judge has scheduled a preliminary hearing next month. That's earlier than expected. Eleanor felt a flutter of nerves. Will I need to testify? Possibly, Patricia replied. But don't worry. We'll prepare everything. After the call ended, Jennifer studied her mother's expression. You okay? Yes, Eleanor said. Just thinking about seeing your father again. Jennifer frowned. You don't have to talk to him. I know. But the idea of standing in the same room as Charles still stirred complicated emotions. That evening Jennifer helped cook dinner. The 2 of them chopped vegetables side by side while the other women chatted around the table. You know, Linda said suddenly. We should celebrate something. Celebrate what? Ruth asked. Linda smiled at Eleanor. Her new life. The idea spread quickly through the room. Dorothy opened a bottle of sparkling cider she had been saving. Glasses were filled and raised. To Eleanor, Carol said. To courage, Ruth added. Eleanor felt her throat tighten as everyone lifted their glasses. To new beginnings. Dorothy finished, they drank together. Later that night Jennifer sat with her mother in the courtyard beneath the maple tree. The air had grown cooler, and the leaves rustled softly above them. "You really did it," Jennifer said quietly. Eleanor looked up at the branches swaying in the moonlight. "Yes. Are you proud of yourself?" The question surprised her. For years she had been ashamed of how long it took to leave. But now, sitting here with her daughter beside her, the shame had faded. "Yes," she said slowly. "I think I am." Jennifer leaned her head gently against her shoulder. "I'm proud of you too." Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment, letting the peace settle around her. In the distance a dog barked once and then fell silent. The world felt wide again. And Eleanor Thompson was finally beginning to see how much life was still waiting for her. The morning Jennifer was supposed to fly back to Seattle arrived too quickly. Eleanor woke early, before the sun had fully risen, and sat quietly in the chair by the window. The courtyard was still gray with dawn, and the maple tree's leaves moved gently in the breeze. Jennifer was still asleep on the bed behind her. For a moment Eleanor simply watched the light grow brighter. Having her daughter here had filled the house with something warm and familiar she hadn't felt in years. The thought of saying goodbye again stirred a small ache in her chest. But this goodbye felt different from the last one. This time there were no unanswered letters, no silent years waiting ahead. Jennifer stirred and sat up slowly. "You're awake already?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. "Couldn't sleep," Eleanor admitted. Jennifer smiled softly. "I had a feeling." They went downstairs together. Dorothy was already in the kitchen making coffee. "Morning," Dorothy said. "Morning," Jennifer replied. "Your flight's not until noon, right?"
"Yeah," Jennifer said.
They ate breakfast with the other women. The conversation easy and warm. Ruth insisted on packing Jennifer a small container of homemade muffins for the flight. "You'll think of us when you eat them," Ruth said. Jennifer laughed. "I definitely will." After breakfast, Eleanor and Jennifer walked slowly around the neighborhood one last time. The air was crisp, and the leaves on the maple trees had turned a deeper shade of red. "I'm really glad I came," Jennifer said. "So am I." Jennifer kicked a small pebble along the sidewalk. "Mom, I meant what I said. If you ever want to move to Seattle, the offer stands." Eleanor touched her arm gently. "I know. And if you ever just want to visit for a while, that works too." "I'd like that." Jennifer smiled. "Good. Because the kids already think you're amazing." Eleanor laughed. "They've never even met me. They've seen the pictures I showed them." They reached a bakery on the corner again. "Cinnamon roll," Jennifer suggested. Eleanor grinned. "Why not?" Inside the bakery they shared one large cinnamon roll and 2 cups of coffee. It felt like a small tradition forming between them. When they finished, it was time to head to the airport. Margaret once again offered to drive them. The ride was quiet but comfortable. At the terminal entrance Jennifer hugged Eleanor tightly. "I'll call you tonight when I land. I'll be waiting." Jennifer stepped back and studied her mother's face. "You really are okay, right?" Eleanor nodded. "I am." Jennifer smiled with relief. Then she disappeared into the airport doors. Eleanor watched until the crowd swallowed her. The ride back to Maple Avenue felt a little emptier, but not lonely. When she stepped inside Dorothy's house, the familiar warmth returned immediately. "You survived the airport goodbye," Dorothy said from the kitchen. Eleanor laughed. "Barely." Linda looked up from the table. "You'll see her again soon." "I know." And for the first time in years, Eleanor believed it. That afternoon Patricia called again. "The hearing is confirmed for next Tuesday," she said. Eleanor felt her stomach tighten slightly. "That's soon, Les. Charles's lawyer pushed for it." "What should I expect?" Patricia's voice remained calm and steady. "The judge will review the preliminary evidence. She may ask questions about your living situation and financial access." Eleanor took a deep breath. "I can answer honestly. That's all we need." After the call ended, Eleanor went upstairs to sit quietly for a while. The thought of seeing Charles again stirred old memories. The early years of their marriage had been happy. Or at least she believed they were. They had laughed often back then. Gone dancing once or twice. Taken Jennifer to the beach on summer weekends. Somewhere along the way things had shifted. Control had replaced companionship. Criticism had replaced affection. But remembering those early days no longer made her question her decision. People changed. Sometimes the healthiest choice was to step away. Tuesday arrived sooner than she expected. Patricia met her outside the courthouse. "You ready?" the lawyer asked. Eleanor nodded. "I think so." The courtroom was smaller than Eleanor imagined. Quiet. Formal. Charles sat at the opposite table beside his lawyer. When he saw her enter, his eyes widened briefly. For a moment they simply looked at each other. He seemed older than she remembered. His hair was thinner, and his posture slightly stooped. But the expression on his face was the same mixture of disbelief and anger she had seen many times before. The judge entered the room. Everyone stood. Judge Sandra Martinez looked calm but observant as she reviewed the documents in front of her. The hearing began. Charles's lawyer spoke first, arguing that Eleanor had been influenced by outside parties, and that her decision to leave was sudden and irrational. Eleanor sat quietly while Patricia listened with a faint smile. When it was Patricia's turn, she placed several documents on the judge's desk. Bank statements, account closures. Evidence of Eleanor receiving only $75 every 2 weeks while Charles spent freely. The judge examined the papers carefully. Then she looked up at Eleanor. "Mrs. Thompson," she said kindly. "Do you feel you had full access to your finances during your marriage?" Eleanor met her gaze. "No, Your Honor." "Did you choose to leave voluntarily?" "Less." "Were you coerced by anyone?" The judge nodded slowly. She turned toward Charles. "Mr. Thompson, the documentation here suggests your wife had extremely limited financial independence for many years." Charles shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I was managing our finances responsibly." Giving your spouse $75 every 2 weeks while maintaining sole control of retirement accounts and savings does not suggest equal partnership. The judge replied calmly. Charles said nothing. The hearing lasted less than an hour. When it ended, Patricia leaned toward Eleanor. "That went very well." Outside the courthouse, Eleanor took a deep breath of fresh air. The tension she had been holding inside her body for years seemed to loosen slightly. "You handled that beautifully," Patricia said. Eleanor smiled faintly. "I just told the truth." As she walked back toward Margaret's car, she realized something surprising. Seeing Charles again had not shaken her the way she expected. Instead, it confirmed something she had slowly come to understand. She had already left that life behind. And she was never going back. The days after the hearing felt strangely quiet. Eleanor woke the next morning expecting to feel nervous or unsettled. But instead there was a calm steadiness in her chest. The hardest moment, standing across the courtroom from Charles, had passed, and she had survived it. More than that, she had spoken clearly. She had told the truth without fear. Dorothy was already in the kitchen when Eleanor came downstairs. "Well?" Dorothy asked, raising an eyebrow while pouring coffee. Eleanor smiled. "It went well." Dorothy handed her a mug. "I knew it would." Ruth and Carol soon joined them, both eager to hear every detail. "He actually tried to say you were confused?" Carol asked, shaking her head. "Yes," Eleanor said, sitting at the table. "But the judge didn't seem convinced." Ruth chuckled softly. "Judges like facts more than stories." And Patricia had plenty of those. Eleanor replied. The women laughed together, and Eleanor felt something warm settle inside her again. A few months ago she would have faced a moment like this alone, quietly absorbing the fear and stress. Now she had people around her who understood. After breakfast she walked to the library as usual. The routine of shelving books and greeting the familiar staff helped clear her mind. Denise, the librarian, waved her over as soon as she walked in. "I heard you had an important day yesterday," Denise said. Eleanor blinked in surprise. How did you hear about that? Helen stopped by earlier. Denise said with a grin. She volunteers here sometimes too. Eleanor laughed softly. I suppose word travels. Well, congratulations, Denise said warmly. Standing up for yourself takes courage. Eleanor nodded. I'm starting to believe that. Later that afternoon she stopped by Helen's office on Oak Street. Helen greeted her with a wide smile. I was hoping you'd come by. I wanted to tell you how the hearing went, Eleanor said. They sat in the same small office where Eleanor had first spilled 15 years of quiet pain. It went better than I expected, Eleanor explained. Helen listened carefully. And how did it feel seeing him again? She asked gently. Eleanor thought for a moment. Strangely ordinary. Ordinary. Less, Eleanor said slowly. For years I thought he had all the power. But yesterday he just looked like an aging man sitting in a courtroom. Helen nodded knowingly. That realization is a powerful step. They talked for nearly an hour. Before Eleanor left, Helen handed her a folder. What's this? Eleanor asked. Volunteer training information. Eleanor looked up in surprise. You mean helping other women? Helen smiled. You mentioned you might want to. Eleanor flipped through the pages slowly. Workshops. Listening training. Advocacy guidelines. I'd like that, she said quietly. You'd be wonderful at it, Helen replied. Walking back to Maple Avenue, Eleanor felt a growing sense of purpose. For so long her life had revolved around reacting to Charles's demands. Now she was making choices again. When she returned home, Linda was sitting on the front steps reading. How was your day? Linda asked. Eleanor sat beside her. I think I just signed up for something new. Good new or scary new? Both, Eleanor admitted. Linda laughed. That usually means it's worth doing. That even the wind gathered in the common room after dinner. Carol had brought out a deck of cards. And they played a relaxed game while chatting about everything from favorite movies to old travel stories. Eleanor found herself laughing more than she had in years. At one point Ruth leaned over and said quietly, You seem lighter every week. I feel lighter, Eleanor replied. Before going upstairs that night Dorothy stopped her in the hallway. I've been meaning to ask, Dorothy said. Have you thought about staying here longer? I thought the plan was temporary. It can be, Dorothy said. But many women choose to stay for a while. Sometimes rebuilding takes time. Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. I like it here. How can you here too? Dorothy replied. Upstairs in her room. Eleanor opened the photo album again. This time she looked not only at the old pictures of her past, but also imagined the new memories she would create. Visiting Jennifer in Seattle. Meeting her grandchildren. Helping other women find their own way out of difficult situations. Her phone buzzed softly on the nightstand. A message from Jennifer appeared. The kids say hi. Sophie wants to show you her newest painting on video tomorrow. Eleanor smiled. I'd love that, she typed back. She placed the phone down and looked out the window at the courtyard. The maple tree leaves had turned deeper shades of gold and red. The seasons were changing. And so was she. For the first time in a very long time, Eleanor felt excited about the future. She no longer measured her life by what she had lost. Instead, she was beginning to see everything she had gained. And the most surprising part was realizing how much life was still ahead of her. The next morning Eleanor woke early once again, though this time she didn't feel the need to linger in the quiet. Instead, she dressed quickly, pulled on her shoes, and went downstairs to the kitchen. Dorothy was already there, humming softly as she prepared breakfast. Good morning, Dorothy said, glancing up with a smile. Morning, Eleanor replied, taking a deep breath. I think I'm ready to start the volunteer training today. You're going to be wonderful, Dorothy said warmly, pouring her a cup of tea. Just remember, helping others doesn't mean losing yourself again. You have to take care of you first. Eleanor nodded, appreciating the reminder. After breakfast, she grabbed her coat and walked the short distance to Helen's office. The sun was higher in the sky than usual, casting a soft glow across the street. It felt like a symbolic start, new light for a new life. Inside, Helen was waiting with a stack of papers and a small binder. "Eleanor, ready for your first session?" she asked, her eyes bright. "I think so," Eleanor replied. The session began with introductions. Several women were already enrolled in the volunteer program, each sharing their reason for being there. Some had personal experience helping others escape abusive situations, others simply wanted to give back to the community. When it was Eleanor's turn, she spoke quietly at first. I left an abusive marriage after 42 years, she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I know what it's like to feel powerless, to lose control of your own life. I want to help other women find their strength again." A gentle applause followed, and Eleanor felt warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in decades, she was not invisible. She was seen. She was heard. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor threw herself into the training. She learned about listening without judgment, about understanding the signs of coercive control, about the legal and financial tools available to women in situations like hers. She practiced role-playing scenarios, learning how to guide women safely through difficult conversations, and how to create actionable plans for independence. Each Friday she returned home to Dorothy's house with a sense of purpose and pride. She had a routine again, but this time it was one she had chosen. Jennifer called often. Sometimes just to chat, sometimes to update Eleanor on her children. One afternoon, Jennifer sent a short video of Sophie, painting a mural across a school hallway. Eleanor laughed and cried at the same time, marveling at how much life she had absent from her daughter's world. One evening, after dinner, Eleanor sat in the courtyard alone. The air was crisp, and the moon cast silver light across the maple leaves. She traced the edges of her mother's silver brush, now resting safely in the small black suitcase that had once carried her life's most precious items. Her thoughts drifted back to the day she left Charles. She remembered the fear, the trembling hands, the uncertainty of stepping into the unknown. But she also remembered the sense of relief. The first breath she had taken when she realized she was finally free. Now, sitting here with the wind brushing against her cheeks, Eleanor realized that freedom was not just about leaving. It was about reclaiming yourself, piece by piece, day by day. The next morning, Jennifer arrived again, this time for a longer visit. Eleanor greeted her with a hug so tight it nearly took her breath away. "Mom, I've missed you," Jennifer said, tears in her eyes. "And I've missed you," Eleanor whispered. They spent the day walking through the nearby park, sharing stories, laughing, and planning future visits. Jennifer suggested a weekend trip to the mountains, a place Eleanor hadn't seen in decades. Eleanor agreed enthusiastically. When they returned to Dorothy's house, Eleanor prepared a simple dinner, sharing stories with the other women about her daughter and the life she was slowly rebuilding. They listened with interest, offering encouragement and celebrating each small victory with her. Later that night, Eleanor sat in her room with the black roller suitcase at her side. It was empty now, but it remained a symbol of the courage she had mustered and the life she had claimed for herself. She smiled softly, feeling a mixture of pride and anticipation. Tomorrow would bring more challenges. There would be paperwork to finalize, more women to help, and memories of the past that might sting. But Eleanor felt ready. She had the tools, the support, and the inner strength she had spent decades rediscovering. For the first time in her life, Eleanor Thompson felt truly alive. Her future was no longer dictated by fear, control, or the shadow of a life she had left behind. It was hers to shape, day by day, choice by choice, heartbeat by heartbeat. And as she drifted to sleep, Eleanor felt a deep certainty settle over her. She had survived. She had reclaimed her life. And she would continue to thrive. The days turned into weeks, and Eleanor's new life began to feel not just real, but fully her own. Each morning she woke to the sounds of the courtyard, the rustling leaves, birds singing, and the occasional laughter of the women sharing breakfast downstairs. She moved through her days with purpose now, no longer dictated by fear or constant calculation. Her volunteer training with Helen had progressed. Eleanor had started meeting with women in one-on-one sessions, listening to their stories, and helping them navigate the first steps toward independence. The work was emotional, exhausting at times, but deeply rewarding. One afternoon, Eleanor returned from a session with a young woman named Marcia, who had left an emotionally abusive partner just a few weeks before. Marcia's hands trembled as she held a small folder of documents. Eleanor guided her gently through the process of organizing her financial records, explaining legal resources, and planning for immediate safety. When Marcia left, Eleanor leaned back in her chair, exhausted but exhilarated. She thought of the black roller suitcase tucked in the corner of her room. Once it had held the sum total of her life, trembling in her hands as she made her escape. Now it was empty, a silent witness to her journey from fear to freedom. That evening, Jennifer arrived for a weekend visit, accompanied by her 2 children, Sophie and Daniel. Eleanor greeted them with open arms, the house suddenly brimming with energy and laughter. Dinner was lively, with stories exchanged, and Eleanor felt a joy she hadn't known in decades. After the children were tucked in, Jennifer and Eleanor sat in the courtyard. The night was cool, and the stars shone brightly above. "I can't believe how much you've grown in just a few months," Jennifer said. Eleanor smiled, tracing the outline of the maple leaves. "I'm just learning what it feels like to be myself again." "You're inspiring," Jennifer said quietly. "Not just to me, but to everyone who hears your story." Eleanor felt a lump in her throat. For so long, she had felt invisible, trapped in a life where her needs didn't matter. Now, to be seen, not just by her daughter, but by women she was helping, felt almost miraculous. The following week, Eleanor received a call from Patricia. "Eleanor, the judge has finalized the separation and the temporary spousal support has been approved. You're officially independent financially," Patricia said warmly. Eleanor exhaled, relief flooding her body. "Thank you, Patricia. I couldn't have done this without you. You did the hard part," Patricia replied. "I just helped guide you." That afternoon, Eleanor took a long walk alone through the neighborhood. The sun was bright, the air fresh. For the first time in years, she felt the world was expansive, full of possibilities. She wandered past the small bakery, the park, and the library where she worked, noticing everything anew. The colors, the smells, the life happening around her, it was vivid and beautiful. Back at Dorothy's, Eleanor spent the evening helping the women prepare for a small community dinner. She shared her story gently, not as a lecture but as a testament to resilience and hope. The room hummed with conversation and laughter, and Eleanor felt connected in a way she hadn't for decades. That night, lying in her bed, Eleanor reflected on the journey she had traveled. 42 years of marriage, years of quiet erosion of independence. And yet she had found the courage to reclaim her life. She thought of Charles and surprisingly, no anger lingered in her heart. Only a calm certainty that she had made the right choice. The black roller suitcase sat beside her bed, empty yet full of meaning. It had been the vessel of her escape. A symbol of courage and now a silent emblem of freedom. Eleanor closed her eyes and allowed herself a rare luxury hope. The coming months would bring challenges. Certainly legal matters, continued adjustment, and helping the women who sought her guidance. But she was ready. For the first time, she could walk forward without fear. Without hesitation, without the shadow of someone else's control. And somewhere deep inside, Eleanor knew she would never be that small, frightened woman again. She had survived, she had fought, and she had reclaimed her life. Tomorrow would be another day, full of choice, full of possibility. And Eleanor Thompson would meet it head-on, fully alive and fully free. Her life was no longer about what she had lost. It was about everything she was about to gain. The morning sunlight poured through the window of Dorothy's apartment, casting a warm glow across Eleanor's room. She woke early, feeling a quiet excitement she hadn't known in decades. Today, she was scheduled to lead her first workshop for a small group of women, navigating the difficult path she herself had walked. After a quick breakfast with Dorothy and the others, Eleanor gathered her notes and stepped out into the crisp morning air. The walk to the community center was short, but each step felt meaningful, a reminder of how far she had come. Helen greeted her with a reassuring smile. "You'll do wonderfully," she said. Eleanor nodded, her heart fluttering slightly. Nerves and excitement mingled in her chest. She reminded herself she knew these lessons intimately. She had lived them. The room filled gradually as the women arrived, shy smiles exchanged and anxious glances made. Eleanor stood at the front, the black roller suitcase beside her. Not filled this time, but symbolic of courage, strength and survival. "Good morning," Eleanor said, her voice steady but warm. "I'm Eleanor. And I'm here to help you find the courage to reclaim your lives, one step at a time." For the next hour, she guided them through exercises she had practiced with Helen. Writing down personal goals, recognizing controlling behaviors, and learning to ask for help. Eleanor shared her story carefully, emphasizing the gradual control Charles had exerted, and the small steps she had taken to regain her independence. Questions followed, timid at first, but soon the women began opening up. One shared her fear of leaving a partner who monitored her every move. Another spoke about being cut off from family. Eleanor listened, offered guidance, and reminded each woman that their experiences were valid, and that help was available. By the end of the session, smiles replaced the initial anxiety. Several women hugged her, whispering thanks and expressing hope for the first time in years. Eleanor's heart swelled. This work, this connection, this empowerment felt like her purpose manifesting. Walking home later, Eleanor felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in a lifetime. The black roller suitcase waited for her in her room, and she paused to touch it gently. Once, it had held all she valued, fears, memories, and the smallest pieces of her courage. Now, it was a reminder of what she had achieved: freedom, dignity, and a life reclaimed. That evening Jennifer called from Seattle. Her voice was bright and animated. "Mom, the kids want to do a video call tonight. Can you?" "Absolutely," Eleanor said with a laugh. "I'll be ready." When the call connected, Sophie and Daniel waved excitedly from the screen. Eleanor laughed and answered their questions, asked about their school projects, and shared stories from her day. Jennifer watched them interact, her eyes moist with emotion. "You've changed so much, Mom," Jennifer said softly after the children had gone to bed. "You're glowing," Eleanor smiled. "It's a new life, Jennifer. One I finally get to live on my terms." Over the following weeks, Eleanor's routine became a tapestry of purpose and connection. She continued her volunteer work, offered guidance to women in need, spent time with Dorothy and the other residents, and enjoyed visits from Jennifer and her grandchildren. Each day brought small victories: helping someone open a bank account, providing a safe space for a scared woman, learning to trust herself fully again. One afternoon, as the golden light of late autumn filtered through the maple leaves in the courtyard, Eleanor paused on the steps outside her apartment. She breathed deeply, feeling the crisp air fill her lungs, and allowed herself to reflect. For 42 years, she had been invisible, constrained, controlled. But now she was alive. She had reclaimed her voice, her independence, her joy. She had built a life of meaning and connection, one she had chosen for herself. Eleanor touched the black roller suitcase tucked behind her door, and whispered softly to the woman she once left. "You survived. You left. You reclaimed your life. And you will continue to thrive." A smile spread across her face as she stepped fully into the courtyard, the sunlight warming her face. The leaves rustled in the wind, as if applauding the journey of a woman who had finally learned to live on her own terms. And in that moment, Eleanor Thompson, at 67, felt an extraordinary truth. It was never too late to find courage, to demand dignity, and to embrace the life she had always deserved. The future stretched before her, vast and uncharted, and she could hardly wait to meet it. Months passed, and Eleanor's life continued to flourish in ways she had never imagined possible. Each morning she woke with a sense of purpose, a quiet certainty that she was no longer living someone else's story, but fully writing her own. Her work with elder services became more than volunteer hours, it was a calling. She guided women through the maze of legal documents, financial independence, and emotional recovery. Each success she witnessed, each woman who left with a newfound spark in her eyes, reinforced Eleanor's belief that courage could be contagious. One crisp winter morning, Eleanor received a letter in the mail. It was from a woman she had helped several months prior, who had finally found a safe place to live. The letter was full of gratitude, telling Eleanor how she had inspired her to reclaim her life. Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes as she read it, realizing the ripple effect of her courage. Jennifer called that afternoon. "Mom, you've been invited to speak at a community event next month," she said, excitement lacing her voice. "They want to hear your story." Eleanor hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "I think I'd like that. If sharing my story helps even one person, it's worth it." As winter turned to spring, Eleanor's bond with Dorothy and the other residents deepened. They celebrated birthdays together, shared stories from their youth, and supported one another through small and large challenges alike. Eleanor often found herself quietly reflecting on how radically different her life had become. One evening, she and Dorothy sat in the courtyard, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. "Do you ever miss your old life?" Dorothy asked softly. Eleanor shook her head. "No. Not really. I remember it. Yes, but I don't miss being powerless. I don't miss being invisible. I've learned to live fully on my own terms." Dorothy smiled, squeezing her hand. "You've grown so much. You're a light for everyone around you." Then, one spring morning, Jennifer arrived with a surprise: a weekend trip to the mountains. Eleanor had always loved the mountains as a child, but life had never allowed her the time or freedom to visit. Together with Jennifer and the children, she explored forests, hiked trails, and breathed the crisp mountain air. At night, they sat by a small fire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories under a star-filled sky. Eleanor marveled at the fact that she was finally creating memories of her own choosing. Memories that weren't controlled by fear or obligation, but by joy and love. Returning to Dorothy's, Eleanor found a letter from Patricia awaiting her. It was brief but powerful, a note of congratulations on her progress, encouragement to continue helping others, and a reminder that Eleanor's courage had created lasting impact. Sitting at her desk, Eleanor traced her fingers over the black roller suitcase, once filled with trembling hope and now a symbol of triumph. She reflected on how much she had changed, from a woman whose life had been dictated by another, to someone who embraced freedom, purpose, and dignity. And as she gazed out over the courtyard, the maple tree's leaves newly green with spring, Eleanor felt a deep sense of peace. She had reclaimed herself, her life, and her joy. The future stretched ahead, uncharted but full of possibility. And Eleanor Thompson, who had once quietly packed a single suitcase to escape a life of control, now faced it boldly, with courage, freedom, and the knowledge that it was never too late to start over. Her journey had begun with fear, but it had ended in empowerment. She had survived, thrived, and learned the extraordinary truth: life could always be rewritten, and every chapter could be hers to define. And Eleanor, finally, was living fully, joyfully, and free. The weeks that followed felt like a steady unfolding of Eleanor's new life. Each day brought a balance of work, community, and connection she had never experienced before. Her mornings were spent volunteering at elder services, guiding women through the difficult first steps of independence. Afternoons were for personal pursuits, reading in the courtyard, visiting the library, or simply taking long walks through the neighborhood. One afternoon, Eleanor received an unexpected visitor: Margaret, the retired librarian who had driven her the day she first left Charles. Margaret's eyes twinkled with warmth as she hugged Eleanor tightly. "I have to see how you're doing," Margaret said. "I think of you often." Eleanor laughed softly. "I'm doing well, better than I could have imagined." They spent the afternoon reminiscing, sharing stories about past lives, and the lives they were now building. Margaret marveled at Eleanor's courage and the way she had embraced her freedom. That evening, Eleanor returned to her apartment with a quiet sense of fulfillment. She prepared a simple dinner, then settled into her favorite chair with a book she had been meaning to read for months. The apartment felt alive with possibility rather than oppression. Every item in her space, books, photographs, the black roller suitcase, told a story of resilience and hope. Her phone buzzed. Jennifer was calling from Seattle, this time with a new project for Eleanor to help with. A mentorship program for young women navigating independence. Eleanor's heart lifted. The circle of giving back, of guiding others through the struggles she had endured, felt deeply meaningful. Weeks turned into months, and Eleanor became a steady presence in the community. She guided countless women, offering both practical advice and emotional support. With each success, Eleanor felt her own confidence and joy expand. She saw in each woman the reflection of her own journey, the fear, the smalls of courage, and the eventual reclaiming of life. One crisp morning, as Eleanor walked through the courtyard, she noticed the maple tree, its branches heavy with new spring blossoms. She paused beneath it, feeling the sunlight warm her face. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine the life she would continue to build, filled with connection, love, and purpose. Dorothy joined her, placing a hand gently on Eleanor's shoulder. "You've transformed so much," Dorothy said softly. "I think we all have because of you." Eleanor smiled, her eyes glistening. "I only hope I can keep giving back, helping others see what's possible." As they watched the leaves flutter in the wind, Eleanor realized something profound. Freedom was not just an escape from fear, it was the ability to choose, to nurture, to grow. Every choice she made now was hers alone, guided by the courage she had found inside herself. That night, Eleanor sat by her window, the black roller suitcase standing quietly in the corner. She traced her fingers over its surface and whispered to herself. "You did it. You survived. You reclaimed your life. And you will continue to thrive." Eleanor Thompson, at 67, understood now that life was not about what had been taken, but what she had earned through courage, patience, and determination. She had left a life of control behind and stepped fully into one of her own design, a life rich with meaning, connection, and hope. And as she drifted to sleep, Eleanor felt the deep, unwavering certainty that every day ahead was hers to live, fully and freely. Her journey was far from over, but she had learned the ultimate truth. It was never too late to reclaim your life, your dignity, and your joy. And Eleanor Thompson, finally free, was ready for every moment of it. Spring gave way to summer, and Eleanor's life settled into a rhythm of purpose and fulfillment. Each day brought its own small victories, helping a woman navigate her first bank account, celebrating the independence of another who had found safe housing, or simply sharing a quiet cup of tea in the courtyard with Dorothy and the other residents. One warm morning, Eleanor decided to visit the local library before heading to elder services. Walking along the familiar streets, she noticed how alive the neighborhood felt in the sunlight. The children playing, neighbors greeting one another. She realized how long it had been since she truly saw the world outside the confines of fear. Inside the library, Denise waved enthusiastically. "Eleanor, come see what we've received from the new donations. Some of these books might be perfect for your reading program." Eleanor smiled, her heart swelling with warmth. She spent the morning sorting books, preparing reading lists, and chatting with students and volunteers alike. For the first time, she felt a deep, uncomplicated joy in contributing without fear, without hesitation, without anyone controlling her actions. Later that afternoon, she returned to Dorothy's to find Jennifer waiting in the courtyard, her children in tow. Sophie and Daniel ran ahead, laughing, and Eleanor felt a twinge of a joy she hadn't known in decades. Jennifer approached with a warm hug. "Mom, I have something to show you," she said, holding a small envelope. "It's an invitation." Eleanor opened it carefully. Inside was an invitation to speak at a women's empowerment conference in the city. They wanted her to share her story of survival, courage, and reclaiming life after years of control. Eleanor's hands trembled, not with fear, but with anticipation. I'd love to," she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "If sharing my story can help even one person, it's worth it." Jennifer smiled, squeezing her hand. "I'm proud of you, Mom. You've come so far." Over the next weeks, Eleanor prepared diligently for the conference. She practiced speaking aloud in front of Dorothy and the other residents, refining the message, sharing both the pain and triumph of her journey. Every retelling reminded her of the courage it had taken to leave Charles, and of the life she had courageously rebuilt. The day of the conference arrived, and Eleanor stepped onto the stage with a mixture of nerves and exhilaration. The audience of women, many of whom had faced abuse or coercive control, listened intently as she shared her story. She spoke of the black roller suitcase, the tiny apartment, the courage it took to leave, and the empowerment that followed. By the end of her talk, the room erupted in applause. Women approached her afterward thanking her, sharing their own fears, and asking for guidance. Eleanor felt a deep sense of fulfillment she had never known. Her voice, once silenced by control and fear, now resonated with strength, hope, and inspiration. That night, as Eleanor walked home through the quiet streets, she reflected on the journey she had traveled. 42 years of marriage, 15 years of subtle control. Countless small compromises, and yet she had found the courage to reclaim her life. She had built a network of support, rebuilt relationships, and found purpose in helping others do the same. Returning to Dorothy's apartment, Eleanor placed her black roller suitcase in the corner. Empty now. It was a symbol not of fear, but of triumph. She touched it gently, whispering to the woman she had been. "You survived. You reclaimed your life. You have strength you didn't know existed." Eleanor sat by the window, gazing at the courtyard bathed in moonlight. The leaves rustled softly, carrying with them a sense of peace and possibility. She knew life would continue to challenge her, but she also knew she had the courage, wisdom, and support to face whatever came next. For the first time in decades, Eleanor Thompson felt truly alive, fully free, and deeply grateful for the life she had reclaimed, and for the countless lives she would now help others reclaim as well. Her journey was far from over, but Eleanor embraced it with open arms, knowing that freedom, dignity, and joy were not just moments to be seized, but a life to be fully lived. Summer deepened, and Eleanor's life had become a tapestry of purpose, connection, and small joys she had never allowed herself before. Each morning, she rose with intention, preparing for her volunteer sessions or planning activities at the library. The courtyard of Dorothy's residence had become a second home, filled with laughter, shared stories, and the quiet comfort of women who understood the trials she had faced. One morning, as Eleanor walked to the library, she noticed the changes in herself reflected in the world around her. The flowers in the window boxes were blooming. The neighborhood children laughed freely in the streets, and the sunlight glinted off the windows of shops she had once walked past without seeing. She breathed deeply, feeling alive in a way she hadn't for decades. At the library, Eleanor settled into her reading program. Children gathered, eager to hear her voice as she read aloud. She felt a thrill in watching their faces light up with curiosity, their hands raised with questions, their excitement mirroring her own newfound enthusiasm for life. She realized that nurturing curiosity and learning in others gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't realized she'd been missing. Later, back at Dorothy's, Eleanor helped prepare a communal dinner. The women shared stories from their present triumphs. Eleanor listened, offering encouragement and sharing insights from her own journey. The room felt alive with shared resilience, a tapestry of women finding their voices and reclaiming their lives. That evening, Eleanor received a call from Jennifer. "Mom, I have a surprise," Jennifer said, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Sophie's school is organizing a Mother-Daughter Day, and they want you to come and participate. Sophie's been talking about it nonstop." Eleanor smiled. I'd love to go. Thank you for inviting me. The following week, Eleanor and Jennifer attended the event. Sophie clung to her mother's hand, excitedly introducing Eleanor to her friends and teachers. For the first time in years, Eleanor felt fully part of her daughter's life. Not as a distant observer, but as an active participant. They laughed, painted, and shared stories, and Eleanor realized how much she had missed in those lost years. Returning home, Eleanor felt a quiet satisfaction. Her life was no longer defined by fear or the control of another, but by the choices she made, the people she loved, and the work she pursued with passion. She glanced at the black roller suitcase in her room, now a symbol of courage and freedom rather than fear. Days turned into weeks, and Eleanor continued her work with elder services, expanding her mentorship program and guiding more men toward independence. She celebrated small victories. The first paycheck of a client who had left an abusive partner. A woman opening her own bank account. Another reconnecting with family after years of isolation. One evening, Dorothy joined Eleanor in the courtyard, holding 2 cups of tea. "You've changed so much, Eleanor," Dorothy said softly. "Not just your life, but the lives of everyone around you. You've brought hope where it was needed most." Eleanor smiled, sipping her tea. "I finally understand what it means to live on my own terms. To make choices not out of fear, but out of love for myself and for others." That night, as Eleanor sat by her window, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. 42 years of marriage, 15 years of subtle control. Countless moments of self-doubt, and yet she had found the courage to step away, to reclaim her independence, and to rebuild her life with dignity and purpose. The future stretched before her, vast and uncharted, but Eleanor no longer feared it. She had discovered the strength within herself to face whatever came next. She had found freedom, joy, and connection, and she knew she would continue to thrive. Eleanor Thompson, once trapped by fear and control, now embraced life fully. Her days were rich with purpose, her heart open to love, her spirit unshackled. And as she drifted to sleep, Eleanor felt an enduring peace. She had survived. She had reclaimed her life, and she would continue to live boldly, freely, and fully. Eleanor woke that morning to the soft hum of summer in the courtyard. The sun streamed through her window, warming her face, and for the first time in decades, she rose without hesitation, without fear. With a sense of anticipation for the day ahead. She dressed carefully, choosing a blouse she hadn't worn in years, and ran her fingers over the black roller suitcase tucked quietly in the corner of her room. It was empty now, yet heavy with the memory of courage and the life she had claimed. Breakfast was quiet but comforting, shared with Dorothy, and the women who had become her second family. They exchanged smiles and small talk, yet Eleanor could feel the strength and resilience in each woman, their stories interwoven with hers in subtle ways. She realized that her own journey had given her more than freedom. It had given her connection, purpose, and community. Later, Eleanor walked to the library, enjoying the crisp summer air. The streets were alive with children, neighbors, and the simple bustle of a world that felt open and full of possibility. She arrived at the library, her heart light, and began her volunteer work with the senior reading program. Each child, each book, each moment of engagement reminded her of the joy of being fully present, without fear or restraint. After the program, she returned to Dorothy's and found Jennifer waiting in the courtyard with Sophie and Daniel. The children ran toward her, laughing and calling her name. Jennifer embraced Eleanor warmly. "Mom, I've missed this," she said softly. "I've missed having you truly here." Eleanor smiled through tears. "I've missed it too, Jennifer. But now we can make up for lost time." That afternoon, they shared stories, played games, and enjoyed a small picnic in the shared garden. Eleanor listened, laughed, and remembered how it felt to live in a world where she was free to make choices, to love, and to participate without fear. As evening fell, Eleanor returned to her apartment, sitting quietly by the window. The courtyard below was bathed in golden light, and the women she had grown close to were chatting and laughing together. She thought of the long road she had traveled, from isolation and control to courage, independence and connection. Every small step she had taken, every risk, every quiet act of defiance had brought her to this moment. Her phone buzzed with a message from Patricia, checking in and reminding her that she had inspired countless others through her story. Eleanor touched the black roller suitcase and whispered softly to the woman she had once been. "You survived life. You reclaimed your life. And now, you will continue to thrive." Eleanor Thompson, at 67, felt the enduring truth of her journey. Freedom was not a single act but a life reclaimed. Dignity was not given but taken. And joy was not something to hope for embrace fully, every day. As she prepared for bed, Eleanor knew that the days ahead would bring challenges, but she also knew she had the strength, wisdom, and courage to face them. The suitcase, once a vessel of trembling hope, now symbolized a life fully lived, a life Eleanor had fought for, earned, and would continue to shape with every choice, every moment, every breath. And in that quiet, golden summer night, Eleanor closed her eyes, finally at peace, fully alive, and endlessly free. The days turned into weeks, and Eleanor's life settled into a rhythm that felt both comforting and exhilarating. Each morning, she woke with purpose, preparing for her volunteer work, her library shifts, or her mentorship sessions with women seeking to reclaim their independence. She had learned to fill her days intentionally, savoring the freedom to make her own choices and pursue passions long suppressed. One bright morning, Eleanor received a call from Jennifer. "Mom, the kids and I are coming to visit this weekend. We thought we could do some gardening, and maybe even start a little project together." Eleanor's heart lifted. "I'd love that," she said, smiling. For the first time in years, family visits weren't dictated by fear or obstruction, they were joyous and mutual. The weekend arrived, and Eleanor prepared her small apartment for her daughter and grandchildren. Sophie and Daniel ran ahead, exploring the courtyard and laughing freely, while Jennifer and Eleanor chatted, filling in the gaps of the years they had lost. Eleanor felt a profound sense of gratitude and belonging. Later that day, as they worked together in the garden, planting flowers and tending to herbs, Eleanor reflected on the journey that had brought her here. 2 years of marriage, 15 years of subtle control, countless moments of quiet desperation. But she had found the courage to step away, to reclaim her independence, and to build a life on her own terms. As the sun began to set, casting golden hues across the courtyard, Eleanor sat quietly, watching Jennifer and the children laugh and play. She thought of the black roller suitcase, once filled with fear and trembling hope, now standing empty in the corner of her apartment, a symbol of the strength and freedom she had claimed. That evening, Jennifer hugged her tightly. "Mom, you're incredible," she whispered. "The way you've rebuilt your life, it's inspiring." Eleanor smiled, tears in her eyes. "It hasn't been easy, but every step was worth it. And the best part is seeing others, my daughter, these women, find their strength too." Over the following weeks, Eleanor continued her work with elder services, expanding her mentorship program, and offering guidance to women navigating the difficult path she had once walked. Each success, each story of resilience, reinforced her belief in the power of courage, community, and self-determination. One evening, as Eleanor sat by the window in her apartment, the warm glow of the setting sun spilling across the room, she reflected on the life she had reclaimed. She thought of Dorothy, Helen, Patricia, Jennifer, Sophie, Daniel, and all the women she had helped and been helped by. She realized that freedom was not just about leaving a controlling life behind. It was about building something meaningful in its place. Eleanor touched the black roller suitcase lightly, and whispered to the woman she had been. "You survived, you left. You reclaimed your life. You are free. And your story will continue to inspire others." The wind rustled the leaves in the courtyard below, and Eleanor felt a profound peace. She had faced fear, taken courageous steps, and rebuilt her life with dignity, purpose, and joy. The future stretched before her, full of promise, connection, and endless possibilities. Eleanor Thompson, at 67, smiled as she looked out into the evening light. She was alive, fully free, and ready for every chapter yet to come. Summer faded into early autumn, and Eleanor's days were filled with a quiet but profound contentment. The mornings were crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of new beginnings. She moved through her routines with a sense of ease, volunteering at elder services, helping women navigate their independence, organizing community programs, and relishing the simple pleasures of her own life. One morning, Eleanor received an unexpected letter in the mail. It was from a woman she had helped several months ago, a note of gratitude, describing how Eleanor's guidance had empowered her to leave an abusive situation and begin a new life. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears as she read the words. Each sentence reminded her that her courage had a ripple effect, inspiring others in ways she hadn't imagined. That afternoon, she met with Dorothy in the courtyard. The air was cool, and the golden leaves rustled gently overhead. "Eleanor," Dorothy said softly, "you've changed so many lives. And not just the women you've helped. You've transformed this whole community with your presence." Eleanor smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I never imagined my life could be this full. I only hope that every woman who comes through these doors knows that they too can reclaim their lives." Over the next few weeks, Eleanor prepared for a larger role in the community. She was invited to speak at a regional seminar about elder abuse, financial control, and the importance of mentorship for women seeking independence. The thought was both exhilarating and humbling. She had once believed her voice was powerless, now it was a beacon of hope. On the day of the seminar, Eleanor stood before a crowd of attendees, her black roller suitcase beside her as a symbol of courage. She shared her story, her years of silent struggle, the small but deliberate steps she had taken to regain her independence, and the profound sense of freedom she now embraced. The audience listened rapt. Women approached afterward, some with tears in their eyes, others with determined expressions, seeking guidance and reassurance. Eleanor realized that her journey had become more than personal triumph. It had become a source of empowerment for countless others. Returning to Dorothy's that evening, Eleanor reflected on the path that had brought her here. 2 years of marriage, 15 years of subtle control, countless moments of fear and doubt. Each step had shaped her, each challenge had strengthened her resolve. The black roller suitcase, once a vessel of trembling hope, now stood empty in the corner, a silent witness to her resilience and courage. Jennifer called later that night. "Mum, the kids and I were just talking about how proud we are of you," she said warmly. "You're changing lives." Eleanor smiled through her tears. "I'm just glad to help. And I'm grateful for all the support that helped me get here." That night, as Eleanor settled into bed, she felt a profound peace. She had survived, reclaimed her life, and transformed it into something meaningful and full of purpose. The future stretched before her, wide and uncharted, yet she no longer feared it. She had learned that courage, determination, and compassion could reshape a life, and now, she wielded those gifts not only for herself but for all the women she could reach. Eleanor Thompson, at 67, closed her eyes with a quiet smile. She was free, fully alive, and ready to embrace every moment of the life she had fought so bravely to reclaim. Autumn deepened, and Eleanor awoke each morning to the crisp air and golden sunlight streaming through her window. The courtyard below was alive with the gentle chatter of the other women, the rustling of leaves, and the distant laughter of children playing in the neighborhood. Eleanor had come to love this rhythm of life, predictable yet full of small, profound joys she had once thought impossible. Her mornings were often spent at elder services, mentoring women navigating the same kind of control and isolation she had endured. Eleanor had become more than a volunteer, she was a trusted guide, a living testament to the possibility of reclaiming one's life. Each story she encountered, each victory she helped facilitate, strengthened her own sense of purpose and fulfillment. One afternoon, Jennifer called. "Mom, Sophie has a school project, and she wants you to help her. It's about family stories, her grandmother's story." "That's you." Eleanor chuckled softly. "I'd love to help. Let's see what we can do together." When Jennifer and the children arrived, Eleanor found herself sharing not just the facts of her life, but the lessons she had learned, the courage to leave, the importance of self-respect, and the joy that comes from independence. Sophie listened wide-eyed, occasionally interjecting with questions, while Daniel nodded thoughtfully. Eleanor realized that even within her own family, her story had the power to inspire and teach. Later that week, Eleanor organized a small gathering at Dorothy's residence. Women she had mentored came together, bringing their experiences, challenges, and triumphs to share. The room buzzed with energy, warmth, and laughter. Eleanor observed quietly, feeling a profound sense of satisfaction. She had once been silenced, hidden, and controlled. But now, she was a beacon of hope and guidance. That evening, as Eleanor sat by her window, the golden leaves of the courtyard reflecting the fading sunlight, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. 2 years of marriage, 15 years of quiet pressure, countless moments of fear and hesitation. Each step had led her to this place of empowerment. Her black roller suitcase sat in the corner, empty now but ever present as a reminder of the courage it had taken to reclaim her life. Eleanor ran her fingers over it, and whispered to the woman she had once been. "You survived. You left. You reclaimed your life. And now your story continues not just for you, but for everyone who needs to know that freedom is possible." In the weeks that followed, Eleanor's life continued to expand in meaningful ways. She led workshops, spoke at seminars, and volunteered her time with renewed energy. She celebrated small victories alongside the women she mentored and found joy in reconnecting with her and grandchildren. Every day was a reminder that courage, determination, and resilience could transform a life. Eleanor Thompson, at 67, was living proof that it was never too late to reclaim one's dignity, independence, and joy. She had survived, she had thrived, and she embraced each new day with gratitude, hope, and an unshakable sense of freedom. And as the autumn winds whispered through the trees outside her window, Eleanor smiled, knowing that her journey, while far from over, was hers to write, fully and freely, for the rest of her days. Winter approached, and with it came a quiet, reflective rhythm to Eleanor's life. The courtyard below was dusted with frost each morning, the air crisp and invigorating. Eleanor had grown to love the subtle changes of the seasons, seeing in them a mirror of her own journey, every transition, every shift in light and weather, a reminder of life's resilience and potential for renewal. Her days were full yet balanced. She continued her work with elder services, mentoring women who faced the same kind of control she had once endured. Each interaction reminded her of her own strength, the small, deliberate steps that had carried her from fear to freedom. She guided them gently, offering both practical advice and emotional support, teaching them how to reclaim independence, finances, and self-respect. One snowy afternoon, Eleanor sat by her window, knitting a scarf for one of the new residents at Dorothy's. The rhythmic motion of her needles was calming, and her mind wandered to her own journey. She remembered the first morning she had woken to the apartment she had once shared with Charles, realizing that the life she had known for 42 years was no longer hers to endure, it was hers to leave behind. Jennifer called that evening, her voice warm and excited. "Mom, Sophie wants to help me decorate the house for the holidays. Can you come over tomorrow?" Eleanor's heart lifted. "I wouldn't miss it," she said. "We'll make it special." The next day, Eleanor joined Jennifer, Sophie, and Daniel in decorating the small living room. They strung lights, hung ornaments, and baked cookies, laughing and sharing stories. Eleanor felt a profound joy she hadn't experienced in decades. These were moments she had once thought impossible, yet here they were, hers to cherish. Returning to Dorothy's that evening, Eleanor reflected on the year behind her. Each season had brought challenges and victories, fear and courage, loss and growth. She had left a life of control and manipulation, reclaimed her independence, and built meaningful connections in ways she had never thought possible. The black roller suitcase still rested in the corner of her room. Empty now. It was a silent witness to the courage she had mustered and the freedom she had claimed. Eleanor touched it lightly, smiling to herself. You survived. You left. You reclaimed your life. And now, every day is yours to shape, yours to live fully. Over the following weeks, Eleanor continued to expand her reach. She led workshops on financial independence, spoke at community events about coercive control, and welcomed women into her life with patience, understanding, and unwavering support. Her story, once private and fraught with fear, had become a beacon of hope for countless others. As winter deepened, Eleanor sat quietly in her favorite chair by the window, watching snowflakes streak lazily to the ground. She thought of the path she had traveled. From oppression to courage, from isolation to community, from fear to freedom. And she knew, without a doubt, that the best days of her life were not behind her. They were ahead. Eleanor Thompson, at 67, had survived, reclaimed her dignity, and embraced her freedom. She had learned that true courage is not the absence of fear, but the determination to act in spite of it. And as the soft winter light filled her room, Eleanor felt a deep, enduring peace, ready to continue living a life fully her own.